After the prequel trilogy was finished in 2005, Star Wars needed a new direction. George Lucas's vision was complete, for the time being, and it was time to prepare a new Star Wars for the upcoming generation. This brought us to the Star Wars of today, with its many highs and lows. And with new Star Wars came new characters, ones who quickly became fan favorites and are now as well known as Obi-Wan or Yoda. But did these characters just come out of thin air? Usually, no. Some of the most popular characters of modern Star Wars actually took heavy inspiration from the old expanded universe books and video games, what Disney now refers to as legends. Disney acquired Star Wars in 2012 and officially decanonized the expanded universe then, but continued taking direct inspiration from its characters and stories, despite what Lucasfilm's new president Kathleen Kennedy had to say about it. So let's take a look at 5 popular figures in modern Star Wars and the original expanded universe counterparts they're derived from. Number 1. Ahsoka Tano and Ferros Olin. These days, Ahsoka is one of the most recognizable characters in all of Star Wars, becoming a fan favorite through her incredible arcs in the Clone Wars, Rebels, and the Mandalorian TV series. But there was once a time when her role in the Star Wars canon was mostly filled by a completely different character from the books. Ferros Olin's story is a familiar one. Like Ahsoka's, it was told through 3 major arcs across different time periods in Star Wars, spanning the Jedi Quest, The Last of the Jedi, and Rebel Force book series. In the old expanded universe canon, Ferros very much held the position Ahsoka fills today. He was raised in the Jedi Temple, had a close and complicated relationship with Obi-Wan and Anakin, and voluntarily left the Jedi Order after a deadly falling out with another Padawan. After leaving, he engaged in various peacekeeping tasks as an independent vigilante, escaped Order 66, and went into hiding for a while. Like Ahsoka, he engaged in the growing rebel movement against the Empire, until reuniting with other former Jedi to form the basis of the rebellion we all know from the original trilogy. His leadership in the rebellion also led him to a climactic fight with Darth Vader, fraught with intense emotion due to his long history with Anakin Skywalker. But unlike Ahsoka, Ferros wouldn't be so lucky as to escape the duel alive. This is a case where I see the story of Ahsoka and her place in the Star Wars universe taking heavy inspiration from Ferros Olin, but also changing it in interesting ways and making it available to a wider audience. Ferros Olin was one of my favorite characters growing up, and I highly recommend reading the books about him, or even just reading through his Wikipedia page. But there are some key differences between him and Ahsoka that I find very interesting. One that stands out to me is their roles in the rebellion. Ahsoka has a good leadership role and lives through the entire ordeal to appear later in The Mandalorian, but I would say Ferros Olin had a more unique impact in his version of the story. The most fascinating thing about Ferros' story for me was always his connection with Leia. In the old Legends books, after Order 66, Ferros is contacted by Obi-Wan and given the special mission to watch over the young Princess Leia, similarly to how Obi-Wan acts as Uncle Ben watching over Luke's childhood. It was a really interesting glimpse past the movies to see how Leia's upbringing differed from Luke's, and how Ferros had to help obscure her natural force powers and protect her from the Empire. But on the flip side, one area where I think Ahsoka's story was more interesting than Ferros's was in her relationship to Anakin. In the early books, from Anakin's perspective, Ferros was always portrayed as a rival and antagonist that Anakin competes with until Ferros bitterly leaves the Jedi Order, only to later learn that his rival ended up going down a very dark path after his departure. As intense and emotional as Ferros's complex relationship with Vader was, Ahsoka's Master-Padawan relationship to Anakin is a much more powerful and interesting twist to the story that left us with very memorable moments. I like both of these characters and their stories equally for their uniqueness and incredible arcs, despite the similarities. Number 2. Hera Syndulla and Mission Vow. Hera was introduced and became popular in the Star Wars Rebels TV show, but she's not the first Twi'lek scoundrel tagging along with the Jedi. Mission Vow from the original Knights of the Old Republic video game followed a similar trajectory, albeit in a different era of the Star Wars timeline. Like Hera, Mission was a young rebellious Twi'lek who learned battle skills on the streets and eventually joined a rebellion against the evil Empire. Only in Mission's case, it was the old Sith Empire. Still, Mission joins up with the Jedi and travels the galaxy on an adventure fighting oppression. The key difference here is in their uniquely interesting story gimmicks. Hera's being that she's a deeply fleshed out character with a lot of engagement in the story, and she's in a romantic relationship with the Jedi. Meanwhile, Mission's unique hook was her being best friends with a Wookiee, so there's that. They're honestly both pretty cool characters, though. Number 3. Jyn Erso and Kyle Katarn. And also Jan Ors, and also kind of Finn. Now, Rogue One is one of my favorite Star Wars movies, and I absolutely love all the characters, ideas, and the story that they introduced. I'd even go so far as to say it was a great improvement on the original, but there is an original that it pulls from. Or actually, many. The expanded universe had a bunch of original stories about how the Death Star plans were stolen, made possible by the fact that in the old EU, the Death Star plans were broken up and kept separately in various locations to prevent one small rebel group from just stealing it in one go.
Are we blind? Deploy the garrison! No!
Rogue One's still fantastic though, but one Death Star plans story from the EU that was extremely popular was that of Kyle Katarn and Jan Ors from the Dark Forces and Jedi Academy games. You can see the influence already, with Jyn being only one vowel separated from Jan. It's also notable that Jan's father, like Jyn's, was an aerospace engineer, while Kyle Katarn's father was an Imperial sympathetic to the rebellion. See the connections and influences here? Honestly, I thought this was just a nice nod that fit well with the story, but as I also mentioned in my video about Rey, it seems that Kyle Katarn was also part of the inspiration for Finn in The Force Awakens, at least in his original conception. Both were young Imperial stormtroopers who eventually became disenchanted with the Empire's brutal tactics, and they ran away with women to join the rebellion. Both were also Force-sensitive and got lightsabers on their way to becoming Jedi, except that Kyle Katarn actually got to do it, while Finn just got sliced up and forgotten. Which brings us to the next pair on our list. Number 4. Ben Solo and Jacen Solo. Now, I think it's fairly well known that Han and Leia had children in the original expanded universe, but unlike the Disney sequel trilogy, in the books they had 3 kids: Jacen Solo, Jaina Solo, and Anakin Solo. Of those 3, Disney's Ben Solo definitely pulls the most from Jacen. Why, you might ask? Because Kylo Ren. In the EU legends, the Solo children were raised mostly by Luke Skywalker as students in his new Jedi Order. Jacen Solo fell to the dark side out of a desire to control the universe and bring peace through retaliation against aggressors, something that eventually spiraled out of control until he took over the whole galaxy and committed some of the worst atrocities ever in Star Wars. Unlike Ben Solo, who turned to the dark side for reasons, and then became a sort of emperor for a bit, except that there was also a real emperor at the time. I don't know. Disney trilogy. But regardless, Jacen Solo had the more interesting story by far. Jacen Solo actually turns to the dark side, is brought back to the light side, and then is turned back to the dark side again, after having a Force vision that him remaining a Jedi would lead to the death of Luke and the destruction of the entire galaxy. So, he's a very complicated figure to say the least, and he has a huge impact on the EU version of events after Return of the Jedi. While in the end, Kylo is redeemed by Rey at the last minute after sacrificing himself in the fight against zombie Palpatine, Jacen Solo from the books is ultimately killed in a duel with his sister Jaina, ending one of the darkest, most intense, and most interesting stories of the entire Star Wars expanded universe. Kylo Ren was just a discount knockoff version of Jacen Solo. So, on this one, Jacen Solo wins. Number 5. Palpatine and also Palpatine. Sheev and the Senate. Because the only thing good enough to replace the Emperor is the Emperor himself. So this goes to Disney's mess of a film, Rise of Skywalker, where Darth Sidious inexplicably comes back to life.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Yeah, there's no explanation given, but Palpatine, am I right? So anyway, this plot point actually isn't an original gimmick. It's taken directly from the 1991 comic series Dark Empire. But the similarities don't end there, oh no. The cocky pilot main character runs into a former girlfriend. Sound familiar? The remnants of the Empire reveal a fleet of planet-destroying capital ships. Sounds familiar. Luke uses a force projection to distract the Sith near the end. Sounds very familiar. Palpatine drains some force from the Jedi and uses that power to unleash a giant cloud of lightning into space. Yeah. Wow. Disney really ran out of ideas and just ripped stuff from the comic into movie form, didn't they? Well, guess what? The comic did it better. In that original Legends version, it's revealed that Palpatine had secretly created a backup clone of himself to transfer his consciousness to through the Force when he died. You know, for emergencies. In an experimental way. Kind of like Voldemort or Sauron. What? An actual explanation that makes sense? Disney, take notes. The comic also handles Luke's Force projection far better. Remember how Luke's Force projection in The Last Jedi was just a distraction and then he dies from it? Well, in the comic books, he actually uses that distraction to buy time so he can go there in person and fight the Emperor himself, face to face, to actually save the rebellion. And you know how Rey just smacks Palpatine's lightning back in his face and he dies because he didn't think to stop shooting it? Well, in the comic, Palpatine's giant lightning cloud is actually a wormhole, and a highly advanced force power that he can't control very well. So Luke and Leia are able to break his focus enough that he's destroyed by his own overconfidence when the wormhole rips apart and destroys him. The Dark Empire comics were admittedly some of the silliest, most far-fetched stories in the Star Wars saga. But they had their place. Light years better than Disney's knockoff discount adaptation that just stripped it of all meaning anyway. But what are your favorite character inspirations or adaptations from the expanded universe? Are there any I missed? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, may the Force be with you. See you next time.